Hey everybody, it's Rothbard's Disciple here, and I'm bringing you another video on Bitcoin, and specifically I'm going to be talking about linking the block reward to the difficulty. The one thing I want to talk about in the first place, though, is that the professor actually gave me a good reply to my question on this topic, and he actually addressed the core issue, because a lot of times people will think I'm talking about, like, I'm worried about hoarding. I'm not worried about hoarding. I'm worried about interest and credit and the loanable funds market. Now, the answer he gave me was that, even though Bitcoin's base supply is is constant at 21 million, you can actually create credit and bonds and things like this within Bitcoin contracts and whatever tokens, and that can actually increase the money supply. But because these tokens, like they have to have a market purpose, they have to have a value. It could be sort of a market-based inflationary model, and this is actually something I've touched upon before in my videos, where I said, because you can create smart contracts and tokens within Bitcoin itself, you might be able to solve this problem internally with what I called sometimes like sub-proof of work chains. Like it depends. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Um, it just matters how you do it. And the professor is the first person to actually give me a good response and to talk about the issues that I was talking about. So I wanted to just preface this video by saying, Bitcoin might actually have a way to do this, and that's what Craig was telling me, and so that seems to make sense to me. But that being said, I still do not buy the idea that we know for sure that Bitcoin's way is the best way. I don't think there's any way to know a priori, what the best way of having inflation or of inflation would be. Like, is the best way to do it through the creation of tokens and bonds within Bitcoin, which has a base supply itself, or is it better to do it with where your base monetary supply actually has the inflation itself? I'm not sure. I really don't know. That's a question that I don't think anyone can answer. I think the market has to answer that. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about specifically, or I'm going to make the case for why you need the inflation in a base monetary supply, and I'm going to make it, once again aggressively, but I do want to, I just wanted to point out that there is an argument to be made against my argument here. But the main point I'm trying to make is that, the arguments don't matter. The market has to decide, so you just got to go out there and compete. And so that's my whole point with this. And so, anyways, the other people, or the other audience that I really want to address here is like the young and hungry developers. I know there's a lot of developers who work on different projects within the world of cryptocurrencies, and they don't make very much money, and it's like you can really make a lot more money with a good fork. And the process I'm going to show you guys today is a good way to fork every single coin in existence. So instead of trying to create that one coin with that one new attribute that's going to beat all the other coins, apply this one attribute to all coins and then fork all coins and then just see what works, and then just go with that. But anyways, again, all we're talking about is changing the block reward, and again, the block reward has a fundamental effect on Bitcoin in general. Obviously, it's the inflation rate. It's also the incentive for security, for miners to mine. Honestly, if there was zero block reward, if there's no money going to the miners, if there's no transaction fees, miners aren't really going to mine very much at all. But if there's a high block reward and a lot of transaction fees, there's going to be a lot of mining activity. And so that block reward matters, okay? The block reward matters. And again, the issue that I'm talking about with this block reward, that the reason why it matters economically and why I think it's inefficient economically is because both the population and wealth tend to increase. And so if the population and wealth tend to increase and the value of money is the list of all goods that money can purchase, then Bitcoin's value must rise accordingly. Like if Bitcoin is the actual monetary supply, if you want Bitcoin to be the base money, and there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin and everything's valued in Bitcoin, well, then the price of Bitcoin has to rise. Like, that's a fact. There's nothing that you can do to avoid this. But a money whose price rises can't really be used for loans. And the reason why is actually very simple. And you just have to imagine a version of money or some sort of economy that uses money that has 10,000% returns daily. So obviously, if your money just increases in value that much, like a bank, in order for a bank to be able to loan out money to a business and for that business to be able to pay off that loan with interest when measured in that version of money, you also have to beat the 10,000% returns on that money. Otherwise, like by the end of the day, people are going to be paying you such a small percentage of what they were paying you. Right, yeah, at the end of the day, they pay you a tiny percentage of what they were paying you at the beginning of the day because the value of that money has increased so much, okay? And so obviously, you can't have an interest, you can't loan out that money at interest because it's just inefficient. There's so much loss involved. And so if that's true at 10,000% returns daily, the same principle applies at a smaller scale. So even if it's just that, hey, every year the value of Bitcoin rises like 1 or 2%, that's still a loss. Again, just like we said, it's just a loss that is incurred in the loanable funds market. And this is the issue. It's not hoarding. It's not, oh, people won't spend enough money. People are going to have to spend money because they need to live. The issue is loaning money to businesses because businesses, by definition, work in the long run. Like when a business creates a product, they have to spend the money on the product, and then it takes a while for them to take that unfinished product and turn it into a finished product. Okay, and so that whole time, if the value of money is increasing, then they also have to compete against the increasing value of money, and so that's a really big issue. And so every single business that exists counts as losses the rise in the money price, and it's the losses of the economy are equal to the percentage rise in that price of money. That's why, again, like if you've ever read any like Austrian economists, when they talk about money, again, the Austrian economic theory, it's you don't make any value statements. It's a positive science and not normative. I hope I got those terms right and didn't screw them up. It's been a while since I used them. But yeah, there's no value statements. So all they really say about money is that like the market's going to choose the best one. But the one thing that they do say about money, and they address this when they talk about socialists, is they say like the one thing socialists get right about money is that money is not value. So it would be preferable to use as money a unit of value, but there's no such thing as a unit of value, okay? And so like that, by definition, when their arguments against socialists say that the best version of money would be a unit of value, but we don't have that unit of value, when you make that argument, by definition, you're saying that the best unit of money, the price can't change. Like true money is value, by definition. That's what it is, okay? And so that's really the basic reason why I want to link the block reward to the difficulty, is because in order to have Bitcoin basically retain constant value over periods of time, you have to have some way for like changes, or for the market to determine what the supply is, okay? You can't just determine it by fiat. You can't just say, hey, we're going to have 0%. You got to have some market-based way. And so this market-based way tries to mimic that of gold and silver mining, and there's no perfect way to decide what the best the best values for these variables that we're going to talk about will be. There's two variables that you adjust yourself, and then there's a third variable that you just use to link the block reward to the difficulty. So the variable that you don't choose is the difficulty now and the difficulty the last period. So all you're doing is you're going to take the difficulty now divided by the difficulty last period to get you the change in difficulty, okay? And so like obviously if your difficulty now is equal to your difficulty last period, like let's say for both periods, you're finding the block exactly every 10 minutes, the difficulty doesn't change at all, then obviously difficulty now divided by difficulty last period, since those two values are the same, your answer is 1, okay? And since we're doing a logarithmic equation, just so you guys know, and this is important to point out, if the log of 1 is 0. That's your answer for a logarithmic equation. And so when you link the block word to difficulty, when you get your full answer, like if you were to get 0 for your answer when the difficulty is the same, that doesn't mean that your block reward is multiplied by 0. It just means you change it 0%. And so actually, if your difficulty is higher, like if your difficulty now is higher than your difficulty last period, it'll make you increase your block reward. But again, there's diminishing returns here, and so that's why this second or third variable actually that I have listed here, x, that's the base of the logarithmic function. So if your base is 10, so just so you guys know, if you don't remember logarithmic math from high school, the way that logarithmic equations work is that if you have it, like let's say we have base 10, because generally speaking log equations are base 10, but so let's say x equals 10. What this means is that in order for the log of di divided by di minus 1, when you have the base being 10, in order for that to equal 1, you actually need your difficulty now to be 10 times your difficulty last period. And so this is what I mean when I say there's diminishing returns, because it's not a linear scale, like it's not a linear relationship between the block reward and difficulty. Your difficulty has to rise exponentially faster than your block reward does. So in order for your the difficulty and the block reward to stay constant, that just means your difficulty doesn't change. But in order for your block reward to double, your difficulty has to increase 10 times. In order for your block reward to triple, your difficulty has to increase 100 times in order for it to triple. Okay, and so this is where this is where the logarithmic math comes into play. And so a lot of people who saw my idea were like, well, how do you stop someone from just increasing the hash power and inflating the coin into nothingness? Well, there's diminishing returns, so you can't do it. This is just the way that logarithmic math works out. So there's nothing that you have to worry about. And so the question is what is the best base for your logarithmic function? I don't know. Although a lot of people would think you want to have a high logarithmic base, like something like 10 or 20, because you guys are really afraid of inflation. The truth is, long term, a lower sort of base might be better. So something like the number e, which is like 2.718, that might be a real good base. I don't really know. You just gotta play with it, let the market decide. Maybe run some simulations. That's the fifth point I have on this slide here. The one good thing about this sort of a block reward is you can run simulations and figure out what will happen under different scenarios, like especially if you're trying to 51% attack other networks and you have hash power going on and off the network. You can run algorithms and just figure it out before actually releasing these block rewards into the wild. You know what I mean? But anyways, moving on from x as the base modifier, and again, the whole reason why you change x is if you have a lower base, that means your block reward is more sensitive to changes in difficulty. If you have a higher base, that means your block reward is less sensitive to changes in difficulty. And what's the best sensitivity to changes in difficulty? We don't know. Again, that's the whole point of this, is we don't know because it's something the market has to decide. But then m, which is just multiplied by the result of the log of di divided by di minus 1. M here is just the diffusions multiplier, and the only thing that M does is it incentivizes newcomers to attract industrial scale early. Okay, and so M is like, how they said the halving of the block reward incentivizes early adopters. Well, M would incentivize early adopters, and like I said before, the diffusions multiplier, it's more like a bell curve. So it'll slowly go up for a while, like the multiplier on the block reward will slowly increase for a while, and then it'll start to slowly decrease, and then it'll become nothingness. And then so eventually, long term, the only thing that defines the block reward's relation to the difficulty is the equation log of di divided by di minus 1. The m is only there for the short term. And so the things you got to remember with m is there's two things. One, how high of a multiplier do you want it to be, and then 2, how long do you want this multiplier to exist? Those are 2 more questions where you don't have the exact answer for this, and again, the only thing you can do is sort of adjust these, maybe run some simulations on the algorithms, and then once you find one that you're confident in, you just release it into the market, because again, ultimately the market has to decide. You can't determine this for yourself. But I just wanted to explain this so that hopefully you guys have a better understanding of the mathematics behind how you would link the block reward to the difficulty. If you guys want to play with this yourself, you can do it real easily. The main thing I would say is just get a scientific calculator, and don't really worry about the diffusions multiplier. That's kind of a more advanced thing that you don't need to worry about. Just start playing around with the base logarithmic equation there, where you have a logarithmic function that you just try and find, or where you find the log of the difficulty now divided by the difficulty last period, and just run some numbers through to figure out how it would change difficulty. And I'm telling you guys, it really mimics the gold and silver production mining in that it has diminishing returns is what it has. That's what logarithm functions are for, is for diminishing returns. So it works out pretty perfectly. Again, I don't know the exact I don't know the perfect base to have for x or anything like that. But if you just run through the equations yourself, you'll see how it works. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it explained my position on the block reward, as well as why it absolutely is possible, and it might even be superior to link the block reward to the difficulty rather than just having it as a function of time as Bitcoin does. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be more coming out soon.